this. So today, like I said, we're going to go over the list of concerns and kind of how to transition from talking about life insurance with them to breaking down their family situation. Okay. This is probably the most important or critical part of the presentation. This is where you're going to do a lot of the selling, if you want to call it that. But at this point too, you're going to be asking a lot of questions from them, getting a lot of information and answers, because you need to figure out where their family situation is at. Okay, now every family is different, every unique situation is different, but we can use basically the same concerns for every single member, right? Now, the list of concerns, the reason that we have this is because we work with what's called the Labor Advisory Board. So the Labor Advisory Board is made up of 50 different union presidents. And what their job is to do is to basically look at programs like ours and make sure that they're the right fit for their unions, right? And what they do is they take feedback from their union members to make these programs like ours better. So when we did a poll with all the head of these unions, they brought to us a big list of concerns. There's a lot of concerns on there, right? But we ended up breaking down that list into 6 major areas, right? Now, keep in mind, every team does this a little bit differently. Like our team would be doing it on the computer virtually. We have a slide that's already ready to go. Some people use a whiteboard, right? It's the same exact concept. It's just you're doing it one or two ways. It's the same exact thing, right? So whatever way you're comfortable doing it, if you need to use a whiteboard, use the whiteboard. If you need to use the PowerPoint we have, use the PowerPoint. I'm a big fan of just using the PowerPoint. You know, it's easier, it's quick, it's simple. I don't have to get up and talk to them and show my back to them while I'm drawing, you know. But I also see the plus of having it on the board as well, because you get them to kind of change the monotony of the presentation by getting up and moving around and showing them different things. You know, you're kind of more on the screen, right? So before I even introduce the list of concerns, typically what I say to our members is I say, now, you know, your next no cost benefit is your needs analysis, you know, and the needs analysis is going to break down your family situation. It's going to let you know if it sees any gaps in any coverages. And if it sees some gaps, it will recommend some ways to cover them. If it doesn't see any gaps, it won't really recommend anything, right? So now before we even go into that, it's going to break down your guys' family's needs based on your situation, right? So when we meet with the head of these unions, they gave us a big list of concerns that their members wanted protected, you know? And we basically broke that list down into 6 main areas, right? So the 6 concerns, guys: 1, permanent and portable benefits; 2, final expenses; 3, protecting their income; 4, having the mortgage or the rent taken care of; 5, having their child's education or any kind of debt taken care of; and then 6, making sure the program is simple enough to where people can qualify for it, and then affordable for those members as well. All right, so if you look at the pie chart, there's really only 4 on there, right? Because the first one, the permanent and portable benefits, that's built into our company. The members know that they get to keep their benefits whether they quit, fire, retire. Even if they're not in the union tomorrow, they still get to keep their benefits. They're still at union negotiated rates, right? So typically don't have to go over the first one, but usually what I say is, you know, there's 6 major concerns, you know, that our union wanted to make sure that you had protected, right? So the first concern every time was making sure that the benefits that those members had were permanent and portable. That's why we exist as a company. You know, that's why your union sought us out, to make sure that if something happens to you guys, when you quit, fire, retire, you still get to keep our life insurance benefits. All right. So the second concern we go over every time is final expenses, making sure that the funeral and final expenses are paid for. Now, I like to, what you should do here is you should ask them very engaging questions. right? You're getting them, the main goal of this is to get them to sell themselves on getting coverage, right? So and keep in mind, not every situation is the same. Some people you might sit down with have coverage. Some people have nothing. Some people are an older generation where all they're worried about is the final expenses. We meet with some young single people who are worried about investments and making sure the money's working for them, right? But no matter what, everybody's going to fit into this circle in one form, shape, or way, okay? So when it comes to final expenses, the first thing we look at is what a funeral costs, right? So nationwide average for a funeral, right, is anywhere from $7,000 to $15,000. That's the nationwide average, right? And what I usually do is I ask my members, I say, Mary and Joe, do you know how much it costs for a funeral nowadays? Right? Some of them might tell me, yeah, it's like, between 20 and 30,000. Or they might be like, yeah, it's like $3,000 to $5,000. Whatever they tell me, I tell them, yeah, that's pretty close. You're pretty close, right? It's actually about 7,000 to 15,000. And I tell them the real number. If they tell me, yeah, if they tell me it's within 7 to 15, I go, yeah, exactly. Nail on the head. It's $12,000, right? But just like milk, eggs, bread, gas, materials used to make this board, every 20 years, prices are doubling, right? So 20 years down the road, we're not looking at $7,000 to $15,000. We're looking at $15,000 to $30,000 for the same funeral, right? Number one, because of standard inflation. Inflation is about 3% a year. Over 20 years, that doubles prices, right? The second reason why is there's no set prices at a funeral home. There's no McDonald's menu board that says cremation's this much, funeral's this much, right? They base it off of what they see. So if you walk into the funeral home and you say, my husband passed away, he had $50,000 of life insurance, what can I get for a funeral? Well, funeral director is going to open his big eyes. Have you ever seen The Mask? When Jim Carrey sees that lady and his eyes like pop out of his mask, right? That's the way that they're going to look at you. Because they know you have $50,000. They're going to make that funeral be right around $50,000. So that's the other reason why funerals are so expensive. People just don't know. And you got to remember, this is the worst time in someone's life. They just lost their best friend of X amount of years. What people tend to do at that point is they tend to throw money at problems to get them to go away. All right? We don't want our members doing that because this is very hard-earned money. Let's make sure it goes to the right places. All right? So just so you guys know, those are the two main reasons why funerals, don't have a set price, and inflation every single year is why they keep increasing. Now, if you look back, if we want to go back, funerals 20 years before this were probably about, I would say maybe 3,000 to 5,000. That's 20 years in the past. And if you really think about it, if anyone remembers getting gas in the 90s, you're probably paying $1.10 a gallon. It's $3.50. There's a Speedway right next to the office, $3.50. Right? So inflation hits everything. Now, what I usually do with our members is I make sure that I project their correct date. Does that make sense? So if they're in their 40s, I project out another 40 years because that puts them at life expectancy. Life expectancy for a male is about 78, 79. For a female, about 83, 84. Right? So women live a little bit longer. Right? I like to joke and say it's because men do dumb things, but it's probably the case, to be honest. Right? And you got to remember, too, when you have a couple, typically the male statistically will pass away first, and then the female will pass away after. Right? So what that does is that leaves a little bit of a gap between when the male passes away and the female passes away, or vice versa. So there's always going to be a gap somewhere. People rarely pass away at the same time, unless it's in a common accident, right? Now, let's say that someone's in their 30s, I'm going to project out 60 years. So I'm not going to multiply this one time. I'm going to say 20 years, you're going to be probably, you're going to be in your 50s. 20 years after that, we're looking at 30 to 60,000, and you're only going to be in your 50s. 10 more years down the road or 20 more years down the road puts you in your 60s or 70s. And at that point, we're probably looking at 60 to 120,000 for that same exact funeral. Now, I hope it doesn't get to that point. I really do. I hope someone comes and steps in and says, hey, this is crazy. We got to stop doing this. But it hasn't happened yet, right? Now, if they wanted cremation, you could just basically cut that in half. Does that make sense? Cremations are about half what a funeral costs nowadays. But just keep in mind, cremations are becoming very popular. And do you know what happens when things become popular? The price goes up. Supply and demand, right? So if something's becoming more popular, like a cremation, you can almost guess down the road it's probably going to be the same amount as a funeral, right? But just off the bat, let them know the cremation is a little bit cheaper. And you got to base this situation off what they want done when they pass away, right? Question one?
Yeah, quick question. Might be a little ahead, but for child education, is there ever a time where you kind of use the inflation as well? Because that's gonna be crazy in like 40 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll get to that for sure. Yeah. He asked about inflation with everything else. Yes, everything has inflation in it, but especially the final expenses. And the one reason why we project out so much is because you just don't know what's going to happen or when they're going to pass away, So, and this is actually the only area where our company suggests you use whole life insurance to protect. Because the final expenses are a when, not an if. Right, Nicole knows this. I always tell people when I'm going over term and whole that my dad would tell me two things when I was a kid. So he'd say, Drew, two things are guaranteed to happen to you in your life. Number one, you're going to die. And number two, you're going to pay taxes. Right? I've seen people get around paying taxes. I've seen it. Never seen anybody cheat death, though. That's one guarantee everybody's got. You just don't know when it's going to happen. Right? So projecting the final expenses is pretty easy. Now, the other reason why they recommend having a big gap like that is because the final expenses don't stop at the funeral home. It might be 10 to 15,000 for what needs done there, right? You're talking about the service afterwards. You're talking about using some money to clean up the house, to get everything ready there. That's final expenses as well. So that's why I usually add anywhere from about 10 to 20,000 on top of that, because they're going to need that money. I've never had anybody, and I never had any one of my members ever call me and say, Drew, I thank you for getting this coverage for my family, but you know what, man, it's too much money. I got to send some of it back to you. I appreciate you taking care of me, but we don't need all that money. I promise you, your clients will never say that to you. Promise you. They're going to thank you for helping them out get that extra 10,000. Right? So the first one, the final expenses, is pretty easy to project and pretty easy to show them where they're at in their category. Right? Now, when they're in their age bracket, circle their age bracket. Right? Visually represent to them where they're at. So what it's going to recommend for your situation, Joe, anywhere from about 30 to 60,000 of whole life insurance to protect that funeral and final expense. Does that make sense to you? All right. These little tie downs here, does that make sense, right? Those little small yeses here, guys, remember the yeses I was telling you before. So do you guys have any questions on final expenses? How to project it out? Anything that you've seen in your sits that you have questions about at all? No? Okay. And we all basically kind of do it the same way, making sure that we project what they're going to see in their current situation. Right? And we even have a projected funeral cost sheet that you can get from your MGAs. And it'll say, when they were born, when they're expected to die, how much the funeral is going to cost when they die. All right, there's a projected list. You can even pop that up on the screen for them and show them. All right. But that's the second concern a lot of our members have, is making sure the final expenses are taken care of. Right. Now, the third concern a lot of our members have is making sure that their income is protected. It's usually one of the biggest concerns that they have. Income protection. Making sure that if something happens to Joe, that Joe's paycheck every single month comes into the house uninterrupted. Now, what we recommend for our company is anywhere for the next 3 to 5 years of their income be protected. 3 to 5 years. Right? That gives somebody a good buffer of 3 to 5 years to go back to school and get a better job, to get another job, to figure things out at the house. This way, they're not stressed about, number one, bringing money into the home to pay bills. They can be stressed about finding a new job instead. They know that they can find the right job, the right position. They don't have to take the first one available just because they need money. Right? So income is very vital to people. Like, people go to work to make money. They use that money to protect their family and help their family. Right? So if you really think about it, people's paychecks are like their heartbeats. So, and I would say, you know, if I was sitting down with Joe and Mary, I would say, Joe, Mary, now, do you guys rely on each other's income? And of course, they'd be like, yes. Yes, we do. We both rely on it. Now, if they're both working, you can ask that question. If Joe's working and Mary's not, or if Mary's working and Joe's not, you can't really kind of ask that question. You can ask the opposite question of, Joe, you know, you're the only one, you know, bringing money into the home right now. You know, how important is your paycheck to the house? Right? So with that, you got to use their numbers in this situation. Don't be afraid to ask them what they make every month. You're going to have to ask them in the needs analysis anyway. Right? What I'm getting at about that, though, is the fact that you need to have that conversation with them here. Joe, let's just say in this instance right now that Joe is working and Mary isn't. Let's just say in this situation, Joe works, Mary stays at home and takes care of 2 kids. Right? So in this instance, I would be like, Joe, if something happened to you, how much does Mary depend on your paycheck? And he would say drastically. Right? And I would say, yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. You know, but Joe, you know, if, you know, I'm sure, you know, you've relied on that paycheck consistently coming in for the past couple of years, you know, basically your whole life. It pays your bills, it pays the rent, it does everything for you guys. You know, I'm sure there's times in your life too, Joe, where maybe you missed a week of work. You missed a paycheck. Right? Did it crumble your family? No, you figured it out. You got by. You're still here, right? You figured it out. And you're always going to figure it out, right? The only way you're not going to figure it out is if you're not here to figure it out. If you go to work one day and you don't come home the next day, you know, that means your paycheck's cut off forever at that point. What income protection would do would make sure that if you went to work tomorrow and you didn't come home, that the next 3 to 5 years of your income is going to come into the house every single month to keep the bills paid, the food on the table, the lights on, right? So if you really think about it, Joe's paycheck is like the heartbeat of the family, right? So you get paid on Friday, right? You're up. Bills come in, boom, down. Paid again on Friday, bills come in. Paid on Friday, bills come in, right? It's like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Just like your heartbeat, right? Your heartbeat's always up and down, boop, 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 right? What happens if your heartbeat goes flat? You're dead, right? You're dead. So what happens when his paycheck goes flat? It's an economic heart attack for the house, right? There's no money coming in. Joe's not coming back from work. What are you going to do? On top of all the other expenses, she got to go get another job now, right? She has to take time with the kids away, right? If it's a 2-parent household and both parents are working, it goes from a 2-parent household to a 0-parent household because that other parent has to pick up more hours at work. They're not going to be around as much. So they effectively lose 2 parents, not 1. This way, when they have income protection, both parents, even if they lose one, the other one could still be there for them. They can use that buffer of 3 to 5 years, right, to figure it out. Now, that income protection is never going to bring Joe back, but what it is going to do is make sure that little Joey can play baseball in the summer. You know, you can still have Christmas. You know, the rent's still paid, the cable's still on, they can still watch their favorite shows. The life doesn't have to drastically change because Joe's not in the picture anymore, right? So what I always ask them right here, and keep in mind too, when you're asking these questions, if they don't give you the answers to these questions, they don't trust you. They don't trust you. You build enough trust in the whole presentation, they should just answer these questions really quickly for you. All right? And I'll ask Joe. I'll say, Joe, how much do you bring in every month? After taxes, just get me close. Ballpark it for me. And let's just say Joe brings in $3,000 a month. And let's just say in this instance, Mary's working too, and Mary brings in $3,000 a month. All right? Joe, Mary. All right? So Joe, every single month, no matter what, he's going to bring in that $3,000. As long as he gets up and goes to work, he's bringing that in. Same with Mary. Now, to project out, all you got to do is multiply 3 times 12, right? 24,000, or no, sorry, 36,000.
36, Drew. 36.
You don't got to be good at math to work here.
72,000 for the both for the year.
Yeah, exactly, right? So 1 year of their income comes out to $36,000, right? So you multiply that by 5 for 5 years. 5 years of Joe's income is about $180,000. Same with Mary, $180,000, right? So both of these people are $180,000 assets to their family. That money's going to come in no matter what, as long as I get up and go to work every day. The only way it's not going to come in is if they don't go to work or they don't come home from work, right? And if this is the lifeline of their family, you can bet they're going to go to work. That's how they're going to pay their bills, right? Now, what I would recommend is I would say, Joe, 5 years of your income comes out to about $180,000. It's probably what they're going to recommend for you to be protected. Same thing for you, Mary. 5 years of your income comes out to about $180,000. That's what they're going to project for you. All right. Do you have any questions on why it made those projections for you? Why I would recommend that amount of coverage being there? And they would typically say no, right? Now, you can do 5 years, you can do 3 years. I always project out longer if they're in a younger family. If they're an older family with kids that are, 16, 17, 18, maybe 3 years, right? Really what you want to do is you want to make sure that the income is that you want to get them to a point where there's no one relying on their income anymore. Does that make sense? So protect those years to where if something does happen, that this is all taken care of. They get 3 to 5 years of having, money coming in every month, no matter what.
That'll give them the time to figure out how to adjust to the change, obviously.
Exactly. Not only does this take time, but it takes money to get through this point. And the more money you have, the more time you have. Right? So you're effectively buying time right here. Right? Now, typically, the way our company recommends covering this is with either a 10-year term or accidental, depending on the age of the person. What I recommend is typically a 10-year term because it'll get them through 10 years of having those kids in the house, right? If you look at a family that has a 3, a 4, and a 5-year-old, 10 years is getting to put them at 13, 14, 15, right? If you look at someone that has a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, well, we're looking at 22 and 25, right? So you just got to project out their kids' ages, because you want to make sure that if something happens, that the kids aren't in a situation to where they don't have any clue what to do. At least they're 18, 19, 20 years old and they can kind of figure it out. If they're 3, 4, and 5, that's a different story, right? They're relying on someone else to help them figure it out, and they have to. Now, something that I kind of go over with our members is kind of called what's called like kind of the ATM close, right? It's kind of a way to getting them to think about themselves as like an irreplaceable source of income. Does that make sense? So I'm going to just role play here with Juan because he's in the building with me, right? So I would say, Juan, let's say, you know, you have an ATM in your basement, right? And this ATM in your basement, every single month, it's going to spit you out $4 grand. Every month you're going to be able to go down there and withdraw $4 grand out of it, right? Now you can get that model that gives you $4 grand every single month, or you can get this model that gives you $3,500 every month. Now the $4,000 model, if it breaks, if it gets damaged, and it stops spitting out money, you're on your own. You got to figure that out, right? But if the one you get for $3,500, if it damages, it breaks, or needs fixed, no matter what, it's still going to give you that $3,500, no matter what, right? Would you choose the ATM that has the one with no warranty or the one with a warranty on it? The one with the warranty. Okay. Now, even though you were going to get $500 less out of that one every month, you would still take the one with the warranty. Right? You want that protection if it breaks down, right? That's what most people say. That's exactly what most people say. They want the protection in case something breaks down on that. They know they're still going to get that $3,500 every month, right? Well, one, I hate to break it to you, man. There's no ATM machine in your basement. Sorry to tell you that. You can't just go out and buy an ATM machine. But if you really think about it, one, you're the ATM machine. Every single month, you're going to get up, you're going to go to work, right? And you're going to bring that $4,000 home every month, right? But what happens if you break? You don't go to work. Where's that money coming from? Right? So this would be like buying the ATM with a warranty attached to it. And you know, if you didn't come home from work, you knew that $3,500 every single month was coming into your family. Right? So if you need to sell somebody on why they need income protection, that's how you do it right there. Compare them to an ATM. Everybody knows how an ATM works, right? So I'm not saying use that every time, but what I'm saying is if people have a tough time getting why they need income protection, compare them to an ATM. Pretty simple, right? Now, do you guys have any questions on income protection? What you should project to them, the numbers, it's pretty simple. Just take their income, multiply it by 12, and then multiply it by 3 or 5. Anybody got any questions on that?
I got everything except the ATM example a little bit.
Okay. So you want to basically just compare them to an ATM. So if you have one ATM in your basement, so you get a choice of 2 ATMs. You have one that every single month it pulls out, it gives you $4,000, right? But if it breaks down, you get nothing, right? And in fact, you have to pay to fix it, right? And then you have ATM B where it doesn't spit you out $4,000, spits you out $3,500, right? But you know that if it breaks down or it gets damaged, that $3,500 is going to come out no matter what. Right? And I would ask them which ATM they would choose. And they're never going to choose ATM A. They're always going to choose ATM B. Always. I could make it $1,000 less and they would still take it every time. Right? Because of the guarantee that it's going to be there. Does that make sense, Nick?
Yeah.
And I get them to answer that question and they usually answer it, yeah, because I know the money's going to be there no matter what. And I would say, you know, sorry, Nick, Unfortunately, there's no ATM in your basement, right? But if you really think about it, you're actually the ATM of the family. And I'm sure your wife or your daughter have probably called you that before, right? They think you're the ATM. That you walk into the house and they have their hand out like this, right? So.
Or if you said that to your kids a few times, hey, what do you think I am? The ATM over here? You can always come ask dad for $40. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure. And I say that to people. I'm sure you've heard this from your wife or your daughter before. What am I, an ATM? Right? As a matter of fact, yes, you are. Right? So getting them to realize that their paycheck is not just a piece of paper. It does so much more for the family than they realize what it does. That's what this whole thing is doing, guys. If you don't realize that, the product we have is not tangible. What I mean by that is it's not a vacuum cleaner. I can't walk into someone's house and be like, Juan, look at this great vacuum. And I'll dump some sand on the ground. And I'm like, look at it. It picks up all the sand, right? Like that doesn't happen. But what I can do is I can paint a picture for you to show you what your life's going to look like without this person being there, right? What it would look like without them being there with no coverage, what it would look like them being what it would look like with them out here with coverage, right? And as long as you paint the picture for them and they see visually what it's going to do for their family, most of the time they're going to agree that they need it, right? So your job here is to paint a picture for them. Show them what their life's going to look like with and without the person being in the home. Does that make sense? All right, cool. Anybody got any other questions on income protection? Nope. Boom. Okay, good. Good. Okay. So next concern that a lot of our union members have, and that's the way I introduce every one of the next sections. I would say the next concern a lot of our union members have, or the fourth concern a lot of our union members have, including them and with them, right, is protecting against, the mortgage. Right. So I'm assuming you guys all know that if someone has a mortgage on their home, they don't actually own the house. The bank owns the house. Right. And if something happens to Joe, do you think the bank's just going to be like, oh, Joe died. Let's give him a couple of months. Let's give him a year or so. No. You're going to get that same bill in the mail every single month, no matter what. It doesn't matter to the bank. Bank does not care that you passed away, right? And it's sad, but that's probably, one of the 2 or 3 biggest reasons why home foreclosure is so high. Because somebody in the family dies and they can't keep up the mortgage. They were relying on 2 people paying it. Now there's only 1 person paying it. And they got to refinance. They got to take a bigger loan out. They got a worse interest percentage. All this stuff goes into it. The bank looks at you as having, if you're making $6,000 a month as a family and you go from $3,000 down to $3,000 a month, the bank's gonna be like, man, you can't afford this payment. We'll minimize your mortgage payment, but guess what? Interest is higher. The time you have to pay is longer. So yeah, you might still be in a house, but you're still paying more for it down the road, right? And I always ask my members here a question, especially if they own the house. If they own the house, I say, Mary and Joe, do you guys rent or do you own where you're at right now? And if they say we own, I'm like, that's great. Now, do you guys own it outright or do you still have a mortgage? And they go, oh, we have a mortgage still. I'd say, okay. So based on that, what would you guys say is the biggest asset that you own? I'm leading them into telling me that the house is the biggest asset that they own, right? They can't answer that question any other way than they say their home, right? Now, you might get some people out there, keep in mind, few and far between, that are jokesters. Like to joke a little bit. Me and Nicole have run into a couple, right? But you still, at this point, you got to be serious with them. This is the point in the presentation where you got to be serious. Not really any joking, right? So if I ask Joe, I say, Joe, what would you say is the most valuable asset that you own? And he goes, My John Deere tractor out back. Really? That's the most valuable asset you own, not the house that your family lives in. Right? And that's kind of what I would say to him. I would be that real with him. Because what he's trying to do is deflect. He knows the right answer. Right? He's just trying to be a hard ass. He's trying to deflect a little bit. At that point, what I would say, Joe, yeah, I get that you like your tractor out back, you know, I get that. But to be honest with you, it's probably, you know, your mortgage, right? Your house. It's probably the most valuable asset you own. And he would be like, yeah, you're right. You're right. You know, but unfortunately, Joe, you know, with the mortgage, you actually don't own the house. The bank actually owns the house. Right? So until you pay off the bank, the house is under until you pay off the bank, the house is under the bank's name, not yours. Right? Now, with mortgage, you can just straight up ask them, Mary and Joe, you know, you said you got a mortgage on the house. How much do you got left? And they'll just tell you. Like I said, you got to build enough rapport, enough trust, and they'll just tell you these things. They'll be like, okay, you know, we owe about $100,000 left on the house. All right. Well, Joe, what mortgage protection would do for your family, it would make sure that if either you or Mary passed away, that $100,000 would come out to the family to pay off the house. Right? It would make sure the house is paid off, the kids could live there, they wouldn't have to pay rent, your family wouldn't have to pick up and move. The only thing you'd have to worry about is estate taxes every year. Right? So once the house is paid off, it goes from your biggest liability to your biggest asset. Right? Most people's biggest liability is the mortgage. It's the biggest amount of money they owe anybody. Right? But also it becomes your biggest asset once that's paid off. There's no better asset to leave somebody than property. There is none. It's the best one. Right? So I would say, Mary and Joe, I can't think of a bigger asset to leave your family than to leave them a mortgage and a house scot-free. Now, if they rent, you can still give them rent protection. Just as simple. Mary and Joe, you guys rent or own? You rent. Okay, great. Well, what's your rent every month? We pay about you know, $2,000 a month in rent. Right? Well, over a year, right? We're looking at $24,000 to rent that house. Right? And I always project out 5 years for them. Always. With rent protection, always 5-year projected. Because typically it's going to be about $100,000. Right? I know it's 96, right? But we'll just keep it this way. Or 106, whatever. Let's just keep ease of use of numbers. Let's say it's 100,000. So what this would do for you guys to protect your rent, it would make sure that the next 5 years of your rent is paid for. You wouldn't have to pick up and move. You wouldn't have to go out and search for new apartments. You wouldn't have to call your landlord and say, hey, can't pay the rent this month because my other half died. Your landlord, depending on how well you know him, might give you an extra month or two. He's not just going to forgive your rent, though. That's how he pays his bills, right? So mortgage protection, rent protection, it's almost the same thing. One, you're owning it forever. The other one is giving you time to figure it out. And most people's biggest bill every month is either their mortgage or their rent. So flipping it from the biggest liability to the biggest asset. That's what we're doing here. Does that make sense, guys? Anybody got questions on mortgage protection? It's pretty simple.
Drew, I have one question.
Sure.
For the interest rate, if they don't know off the top of their head, is there just a basic one that we should try to fill in for everyone or no?
Yeah, common interest rates now, I would say like 3.5%. Depending on their credit, they can get a lot lower. But common interest rates now are about 3.5%. So if you want to put 3.5 in there for the needs analysis, I know exactly what you're thinking. Yep, 3.5% would be. If they don't know theirs, then put that in there. And of course, like I said, there's better interest rates out there they refinance, they'll probably get a better rate, that type of thing. But good question. Anybody else got any other questions? Nope. All right, cool. All right, so the fifth concern most of our union members have is making sure that if they don't come home tomorrow, that at least their kids can go to school down the road. Now, I introduced this by asking them, especially if they have kids, Mary and Joe, do you want your kids to go to school? Most of the time, they're going to be like, yeah, I want them to go to school. Definitely. Right? They'll be like, Drew, what kind of question is that? Right? But the reason I'm asking it is because I want them to agree with me on this. So I would say, Joe and Mary, you guys have 2 kids, right? And I'm assuming you want them to go to school, right? And they'll be like, yes. I would say, okay, what we say here at the company is that if you're not here, at least give them an opportunity. Let them go to trade school. Let them open up a business. Let them use the money to go on a vacation, buy a new car. Like, let them use the money to do what they want to do with it, right? Not everybody's built for college. Not everybody's built for trade school, right? And some families will say that. Some families will be like, yeah, I want them to go to school, but, they're going to do what they want to do. I'll let them do what they want to do. So why this is a big point, though, is because not a lot of families have stuff set up for their kids to go to school. It's expensive, right? Nationwide average for a 4-year university is anywhere from 20 to 100K over those 4 years, right? Anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000. Depends on what school they go to, depends how long they've been there, right? Now, I graduated in 2011, right? I went out of state. My tuition was like $17,000 a year. After the second year, I lived in state, so it went down a little bit. But at the end of the day, I walked out of school with $70,000 in student loans. I went there for 5 years too, right? So I owed somebody 70 grand. If I passed away, that money's going to my family. That money, that loan's not forgiven. Someone's got to pay that money off, right? But that money doesn't come from anywhere. I borrowed that money. No one had anything set up for me. I had to take that money out. Wouldn't it be way easier as if you weren't here? The money was already there for your kids to go. It was already set aside. To go to trade school, open up a business, do what they wanted to do. Right? So Joe, you have 2 kids, right? So if we just average it out, about 100,000 for little Timmy, and then 100,000 for little Susie. So what college education protection would do would make sure that if, Joe, you didn't come home, you could give your kids $100,000 to go to school down the road. Right? Kids' education is pretty easy to project. Just use 100,000. Keep it simple. Now, keep in mind, too, if they go to school to be a doctor or a lawyer, they're going to be there for more than 4 years. So that's going to be a little bit more expensive, right? But the thing about this is you can also use this to protect the kid while he's in school. What I mean by that is when I went to school, I grew up with 5 other brothers, right? So my mom did not have money set aside for us to go to school. There was no way she could do it. She said, you go to school if you want to go to school. Okay, so I decided I wanted to go to school. I took out student loans, I got grants, scholarships, things like that, right? But what I had to do was take out a student loan for like $100,000, right? But at that time, I'm 18 years old. What company is going to give an 18-year-old kid an $100,000 loan? No one really. So what I had to do is get a cosigner on my loan, right? Guess who my cosigner was? My mom, right? And what that means is if I'm in school and I die, guess who's responsible to pay those loans back? My mom is, right? And I don't know if you guys know about West Virginia University, but when I went there from 2006 to 2011, it was the #1 party school in America for 4 of those 5 years, right? So at that point, my mom was like, if you're going to go away to school and you're going to party, I need to have this protection on you. So what she did is she took out a 10-year, $100,000 policy on me. So that if I did pass away in those 10 years of going to school, my loans were forgiven. That money is never going to bring me back in any way, shape, or form. But what it will do is make sure that my mom doesn't go into drastic debt because of something stupid I did at school. Right? You can project that to the families. Joe, your daughter's 19. She's in school now. Did you take out anything on the student loans for her? You did? How much? 80,000? Okay. So what this would do is make sure that if you died, that student loan was forgiven for her. She didn't have to worry about paying for that down the road. I can't think of a better present to leave your kid than a free college education. Right? So you can do it both ways. You can protect the kids when they're young for their future, or you can protect the kids while they're going through school. Right? So you got any questions on kids' education, child education? Okay. So I want you also guys to realize that not every family has kids. Not every family is going to be in a situation to where the kids are always there. You might run into someone who's 45, 50 years old. Their kids are out of school. They're out living on their own. At this point, they don't have to worry about the kids' education. It's gone. But what they do got to worry about, debt. Debt. So we want to figure out what they owe debt-wise. And this is just as easy to break down to them. All you got to do is ask them, Joe, Mary, the last concern a lot of our members have is protecting the debt, making sure that doesn't get passed down from generation to generation. All right. So, Joe, do you have any kind of crazy outstanding debts, like any student loans or any kind of medical bills or any kind of like car loans, anything like that, credit card bills? And just start breaking them down with them. Let's say they owe 10 grand on their credit card. They owe another 20,000 on the car. And then Joe got 50,000 in student loans he's still paying off. And maybe some hospital bills racking up about 5 G's. Right? So $85,000 is what he's in debt. Someone's going to have to pay $80,000 when he passes away. Right, now, if you guys remember from the other training, when someone passes away, everything goes to their estate, the positive and the negative, right? So Joe's going to have a negative $85,000 balance on his estate. So what you got to do is make sure that you have at least $100,000 to make sure that if something does happen, his family can pay off the debt and then have some money too. Whatever their total is, I would usually double it. So if he owes 85, I would show him 200,000 of protection. Get out of debt and then leave your family some money too. Now keep in mind, most likely income or child education and debt are typically going to be protected with accidental death benefit. Right? Because you got to remember, if somebody's under the age of 50, the #1 cause of death in America is an accident. Over the age of 50, it becomes heart disease. So what we're doing, we're just playing the odds here. Especially if you have someone that's young. I ask people, I would say, Joe, you know, if you die tomorrow, keep in mind, Joe, you're 40 years old. If you die tomorrow, do you think it'd be from natural causes? Or do you think it'd be some kind of accident? And they would say accident most of the time, you know? And if they say, oh, probably health problems, then you know, like, underwriting for this is going to be a little rough, right? He's already thinking about health problems. So, but what I'm getting at, guys, is that accidental death benefit will take care of all of this. It'll make sure that if something happens accident-wise, all their debts taken care of. Their family doesn't have to worry about anything. So break down their debt, individualize it for them. Get them a final number and circle it, right? And then also what you can do with this, and I have it written with a little star here. I don't know if you can see it. It says legacy. If no one has any debt, if they don't have any kids in the house, they can leave a legacy for their family, right? And a question I'll ask them, I'll say, Joe, it seems like you got a lot of this protection in place here, which is great. But I'm going to ask you a question. And, you know, if you were to leave a legacy or a liability, which would you want to leave? And they're going to say legacy every time. No one wants to leave somebody with a liability, right? Okay, yeah, you would say legacy. Most of our members say the same thing. You know, what this would do, and this would make sure that if something happened to you, your family would have $100,000 to move your legacy on down the road. You know, give your family, you know, let them put that pool in the backyard. Let them go on a summer vacation every year because of you. Let them experience some better things than you got to experience. That's all, to be honest with you guys, that's all parents want from their kids. They just want a better life than they had. That's it. Right? This is a way to give it to them. Because if Joe doesn't come home, they're going to need some money to take care of those things. But if Joe does come home, he's going to do everything in his power to make their lives better anyway. Right? That's why accidental coverage is good, because they're going to go to work. They're going to bring home money. That's always going to be there. But if they don't come home because of an accident, that's bonus money on top. That's where the legacy grows. Right? So anybody got questions on kids' education, debt, legacy?
Hey, Drew, I have a question. It's kind of off topic. It's not about the income. I was just wondering, are you going to introduce, I don't know if I missed it or something, but are you going to introduce the freedom of choice certificate later on? Because I would typically do it with the final expense, like talk to them about how it's like a prepaid funeral and stuff. But I don't know if you missed it or I missed it.
No, you didn't miss it. I do go over that, but I don't do it until the needs analysis, after the needs analysis. You know, after you go through the needs analysis, the first video that pops up, it says, let's examine your need for final expense protection. That video explains the freedom of choice certificate. So that's when I break it down for them right there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, because the way I learned it was like what the funeral expenses, like I typically ask them a question like, you know, if something were to happen to you, when would the funeral house expect their, you know, your payment? And it would say, oh, your funeral, like freedom of choice certificate pays in 3 to 5 business days. And it's like,
yeah.
So it's okay if you, if you do it either way.
For sure. Okay. For sure. It's not a bad thing. I mean, sometimes I mention it. Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's exactly why they have the final expense protection for you on the freedom of choice certificate. And I'll go over how that works here in a little bit for you.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, you're good. You're good. Anybody else got any other questions? Nope. Okay, good. So the final concern is making sure. The final concern is making sure that our programs are, number one, affordable, and number two, that our members are able to qualify for them. Right? So that's why we go over the needs analysis. That's why we go over, you know, the medical questions with them. Right? The needs analysis is really designed, guys, to make sure that they can comfortably set aside 3 to 5% of what they bring home. It's not going to show them something outrageous. Like if they're making $5,000 as a household, it's going to show them 3 to 5% of that. Right? Now, if they're making 1,000, it's going to show them a recommendation for 3 to 5% of that too. Just keep that in mind. No, that's why the needs analysis is there, because it recommends coverage that's comfortable for them. But the most important part of this is not breaking them down with their coverage. It's asking the question after that. So I would say, now Joe and Mary, we went over a lot of information there for you. And, you know, I'm going to ask you a question. And keep in mind, Joe, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. I would say, Joe, if you did not come home tomorrow and you can guarantee that one of these was protected forever, either your final expenses, your income, your mortgage, or your kid's education, what would you say is the most important to you? Right? So Juan, role play this with me. You ready? So Juan, you know, we went over a lot of information here for you, and we kind of broke down your situation. So you can see that, you know, you basically have these 4 needs here. And one, you know, if you didn't come home from work tomorrow and you can guarantee that one of these areas was taken care of forever, which would you say is the most important to you?
Child education.
You would say your kid's education. All right, you would say your kid's education. Why would you say your kid's education though?
I know that I had to basically get through school on my own, so I want to make sure that that's taken care of.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you had to struggle and you had to do everything yourself here, and you want to make sure that that doesn't happen to your kids.
Yeah.
Kind of give them like an easier way to get it, the same thing accomplished.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You know, actually, most members say the same exact thing that are in your situation. They want to make sure that they better the next generation. All right. So do you guys see what I did there? I asked them which one was the most important to them. I circled it, and then I asked them why.
And then you did the most important part was agreed.
You got to ask them why. You got to get them to sell themselves on why they need this. Right? And why I'm getting them to pick one is because if I ever have to reduce them down, I know which one I got to keep, because that's the most important thing to them. So I'm going to build a plan around making sure that their kids are good to go. Does that make sense?
Hey,
Okay.
Hey,
Now,
Drew, quick question here.
I would ask Mary the exact same question. I would say, Mary, same question to you. Once again, no right or wrong answer. But if something happened to you, Mary, and you didn't come home from work tomorrow, what would you say is the most important to you? Right? And let's just say she says income. I would go, okay, great, income. Why would you say the income, Mary? Right? And most of the time they're going to be like, yeah, because, you know, if I go, I at least know the paycheck's coming in every month. I get that. But what does your paycheck do for the family? What would you want them to get them to do if they ever say more income protection? Get them to say what their family does with that paycheck. What does your paycheck do for the family? It keeps the bills paid. It keeps the lights on. Make sure we can eat out every week. Right? Once again, we're turning that physical paper check into reality, into what it does for them as a family, not just a physical bill or a check. Does that make sense? So once you get them to pick an option, to pick which one is most important to them, you ask them why it's important. Use active listening to repeat the last couple words they said, and then ask them what it really does for their family. Why would the education be so important to you? We're getting them to sell themselves on why they need this, right? Once they do sell themselves, at that point, I go, okay, great. You know, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to plug your actual numbers into the needs analysis, and it's going to see if it recommends any coverage for you guys based on what we put in there. If it does show some gaps, it will recommend some ways to cover them. If it doesn't show any gaps, it won't recommend anything, right? So the best email address you have, right? And then you flip right into the e-app, right onto the needs analysis and run through it with them. Super, super simple transition from there, right? So what I want to do now though, guys, is you're probably never going to run into a unique situation where, I mean, you might, and that's why our company exists, is some people don't have life insurance coverage. They don't have it, right? Well, let's just say you're sitting down with someone who does have coverage, right? Let's say you're sitting down with Joe and Mary, union member, and going through the family information guide, you figure out that they have coverage. You know that they have, like, let's say they have whatever kind of coverage, doesn't matter, right? I would still go through the final expenses, still show them it recommends 30 to 60,000 for the final expenses. And if they had work coverage, I would spend their work coverage here. They told me, yeah, you know, work covers me for $100,000. I would say, great, that's fantastic, right? So if work covers you for 100,000, you know, 5 years of your income comes out to about 180,000, right? It looks like you have, you know, most of that circle covered off there. You just have a little bit of a gap of 80,000 there, right? So I shade it off. I mark it off for them so they can visually see where their gap is. So they have really of a gap of about $80,000 there. This works the same way as if they have a term policy through another company. So you mentioned that you have some coverage through State Farm, right? And you said it was what, 200,000? Okay, great. So we're going to do, you know, something happens, that 200,000 there, it's designed to take care of the income for you. Spend their coverage. Does that make sense? Spend it. Don't let them tell you they have coverage and don't spend it. So if at this point they're like, yeah, I already have coverage. I know I have coverage. I'm good. I need it. I don't need any other coverage. Right? At this point, guys, what I do, like I said, I spend their coverage and then I give them kind of a scenario. Right? And just humor me, Juan. Let's say, Juan, me and you, we got to go to the 7-Eleven and we need to get milk, eggs, and bread. Right? For that, it's probably like $13 or something like that. Right? When we get to the counter, and in your right-hand pocket, you have a $20 bill, and in your left-hand pocket, you have a $100 bill. Which pocket are you reaching into to pay? You using the 20 or are you using the 100?
The 20.
You're going to use the 20. That's the right answer. Why would you say the 20?
I don't want to be that guy that has them break 100.
Okay, you don't want to break the 100.
Yeah.
What happens if you break the 100?
Not 100 anymore.
Right? So what most people are going to say is once you break the $100 bill, you got a bunch of 20s. Now, once there are a bunch of 20s, you just spend those. Right? Once you break that $100 bill, you're going to spend the rest of it. That's just how it works. Now, I don't know if you guys are like that, but I'm like that. If I have a $100 bill and I break it, I just look at it as less money now. The 100's gone already, spent already. Right? That's the way life insurance is going to work for them too. So if Mary has to use 40,000 of the 200,000 to protect the final expenses, well, now she has 160,000 over here, right? Now she has 160,000 over here. And because she already broke it, she's just going to keep digging into it over and over and over. And that 160 is going to go like this. Because you're going to buy things she doesn't need. So what we recommend is making sure that your funeral and final expenses are protected with 30,000 of whole life insurance. Use that as the $20 bill to take care of the final expenses. Keep the rest of the 200,000 there to protect your income for your family. Right? You can agree that if something did happen, you would want all the 200,000 to go to the income, right? And they would say, yeah. Do you see how I kind of just sold them coverage even though they already have coverage? I didn't sell it on price. I sold it on concept. That's what you guys have to remember here. We're not selling anything on price or anything on the value of what they have. It's based on a concept. The concept of final expense protection, the concept of income protection. It's easier to explain concepts to people than it is numbers. Does that make sense? And keep in mind too, hold on one second. Let's see where this video is coming out of. Okay. And keep in mind, like, they might have mortgage protection. If they got mortgage protection, cross it out, right? Let them know that they did a good job. If they already have coverage, don't beat them up about it. Commend them for it. You guys did a phenomenal job of getting that $200,000 of coverage through State Farm, because what that's going to do, it's going to protect that gap that you have where income protection is. But as you can see, we still have 3 other gaps. We have the kids' education, the mortgage, and the final expenses. So Joe, if something happened to you, which one of those 3 would be the most important to you? I'm not just letting him tell me he has $200,000 of coverage and leaving. You're good. See you later, man. Have fun. And just take off, right? No, because at the end of the day, that $200,000 is designed to go somewhere, not designed to take care of the final expenses and then get the rest of it distributed. Does that make sense? Like, that's why our freedom of choice certificate is great, because the funeral director gets what he needs and then the rest goes back to the family. Right? So you're not breaking that 20 and then having to use that, or not breaking that 100 and having to use those 20s over and over and over again. All right? So, I mean, and you could break down that in any one of the sections, whatever's important to them. Just know that if they have coverage, don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. Right? Because you're going to run into people that have coverage. You know, they might not have the right type for them. They might not know what type it is. They might not know how much they're paying for it. At the end of the day, that's our job to make sure that we figure that out for them now. Right? So if you didn't ask about what kind of coverage they have, you can ask right here, because you already went through term and whole. You already explained and showed them that you're the expert. I would never go over someone's life insurance policy until I explain to them that I'm the expert in this. Does that make sense? All right. So, I mean, that's all I really got for you guys. I leave a little bit of extra time for questions on anything you got. And then keep in mind too, guys, I know everybody does this a little bit different. But what I want you to realize is the concept behind it, why we're doing it. We're getting them to, number one, put their family situation on paper in front of them or a whiteboard in front of them. Number two, we're getting them to show that there are physical gaps in their coverages, right? And then number three, we're getting them to sell themselves on why they need it, right? But I'm gonna open it up for questions. Anybody got any questions?
Hey, Drew, I got a question here. So with the debt and education, you said accidental debt and dismemberment, right? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to switch it up because it's on the, try to say something now.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, way better, way better.
Awesome. So I was saying, like, it's accidental death and dismemberment. So you're saying your kid is going to have a chance for education, and we're going to cover that with accidental death. But what that means is, like, the only way he's going to get that paid off if he dies or if he loses 2 limbs or something like that, right? If that doesn't happen, his education is not paid for. So what happens in that situation? Because if I'm a parent and you tell me the only way his education will be paid for, you know, and comfortable for me is if he loses his 2 limbs or loses his life. You know, so in that case, do you recommend life policy as well for that? Or, like, what do you do? What's your game plan there?
Yeah. I mean, if someone ever told me that, I would say, yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's because of an accident, you know. To be honest, accidental coverage is typically the best bang for their buck anyway. You know, $200,000 of accidental coverage is $16.67.
Yeah.
If you looked at a $200,000 10-year policy, we're looking at like $90 to $100, maybe more, depending on their age, right? So if they're willing to put that into it, then yeah, 100%, let's go for that. But you got to remember the demographic we're working with, right? So a lot of the time it's more bang for their buck at that point. And to be honest, if they're young and they're healthy, they're going to outlive those kids going to school anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you got to project to them.
Right. The reason why I asked that because like the way you said it seemed like a guarantee, like they will have the opportunity for the education, right? So the reason for this question was like, do you actually make it sound like that, or do you make it sound like, well, they have this in place, so it's kind of a chance for them to kind of get out of school without like a big deal, because if you die, then that's covered for. But if you don't die, then they still are stuck with that. So do you say like it's just a chance, like it's like a lottery ticket or something like that? Because the way you said it, it's like kind of guaranteed, right?
Yeah. What I usually say is I ask them the question on, Joe, if you died tomorrow, do you think it'd be because of an accident, or do you think it'd be because of normal health problems? And if they agree with me that it's going to be an accident, then I don't have any issue showing them accidental coverage. Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Because they agreed to me, they told me that probably the way they're going to pass away was because of an accident. All right. Once you get that agreement back and forth, then you can just go with it.
Gotcha.
Now, keep in mind too, if you're showing them the accidental coverage and they're like, yeah, we need to make sure that it's permanent, that's fine. Just show them term. There's a 4-year term that's pretty affordable, that can do the same thing.
Do we have 4-year term in our EAPS?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So if you look at the EAP where the coverage is under the A section.
Yeah.
There's 4 boxes at the top. It says WL, PR, EX, and then SL.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 boxes below it. There's a box that has like LPU65, yeah. And then there's one that has a blank line.
Right.
The one where that blank line is, that's where all the term-based plans are.
Oh, okay.
Click that box, you can get them a 20-year level term base, a 10-year, and a 4 years in there.
Right. Because with the drop-down box, it's only 10-year convertible and renewable, and that's what I saw. And I didn't know that you could do the 4-year one too. But
right,
thank you, man.
It's under that box right there. Yep.
That answered my question.
Okay, cool. Paul, you got a question, man? Wait, you're on mute, I think.
I was excited and ready to go. So today I was kind of doing an EAP example, and it was like a 24-year-old kid. So that needs analysis. He's most likely probably not living in a house. He's renting. He doesn't really have that crazy of amount of like debt, unless if he just got out of college. And then his income protection, he's single and he doesn't really have any dependents. So would you say the best way to go about it is kind of talk about like a what if scenario, like talk about future if you're like trying to set up a family, or I don't know what kind of approach.
Yeah. That's a very good question. And Vince is going to go over this with you again on Friday.
Okay.
It comes down to like, when it's almost like single people versus seniors in that sense, right? Like a family has inherent needs. They're going to have mortgage protection, income protection, because there's people relying on each other, right? Yeah. But when you have a single person, especially a young single person, the only thing they're concerned about is what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Right. What's in it for me? Why do I want to do this? Why do I need to do this? Right. So at that point, what you should focus on is building their cash value, showing them policies that have big cash value and paid up options.
Okay.
So instead of showing them 30 to 60,000 of whole life, I'm showing them 200,000 of whole life.
Yeah.
100,000 of whole life.
And those options are usually cheaper as well, right?
What was that?
And their premiums are usually significantly cheaper as well.
Yeah. So for 200,000 for a 24-year-old, you're probably looking at like, I don't know, $125.
Yeah. I ran the scenario today. It was like for 100,000, it was like $80.
Yeah. So what you have to do in that situation is show them where the cash value is going to be at 65, and then what they're going to put into it versus what they're going to get out of it.
Okay. Yeah.
So all you got to do is take what they're going to pay every month, multiply it by 12.
Yeah.
And then subtract how many years they are till 65. So if they're 25, multiply by 40. That's what they'll put in versus cash value or paid up options.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thank you. That answered it a lot better for me. I was kind of just going with a what if scenario type thing today when I was role playing this morning, and I was like, this doesn't seem.
Yeah. So young single people, you got to make sure they understand what's in it for them.
Okay.
And then too, like projecting down the road, Paul, is not a bad idea either.
Yeah, when
Okay.
you have a
Hey,
baby, when
do
you
you
have
want
a
to start a
family.
family one day? Do you want to have kids one day?
Yeah, that was more along of what I was doing
Yeah.
majority of the time. But I think the back end idea of what's in it for me is definitely going to be a lot more helpful as well.
That's what more or less is going through their brain.
Okay.
Why do I need to do this? What's in it for me? What's gonna benefit me down the road? You know,
Cool.
not
Okay.
only is it gonna lock their health in when they're young and healthy, but it's gonna build money for them and grow, what they put into it every year too.
Okay. Thank you.
So very good question. And Vince is gonna go over a lot more of that on Friday for you guys, more specifics on like singles versus senior people. But anybody else got any questions? No? All right, cool. Well, we did record this, guys, so I can get you the recording if you need it. Go out there. I know everyone's got some sits today. Hopefully everyone's been able to get all the way up to this point in the presentation, and this will just be kind of more of what you got to get through next, right? So, I mean, other than that, you guys all have my number. You have my email address. You all got the Will Kit information correct that I sent you last week? Got the video and everything? Okay, good.
Good presentation, Drew. Thanks for your time.
No
Learned a
problem,
lot.
guys. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Breakdown.
Get out there and rock it today. One thing I always tell my agents, no matter what kind of day they're having, go have fun with these people. Just go out and have some fun. If they like you, if you're having fun with them, build the relationship and they'll just kind of do what the program recommends, right? But if they don't trust you, if they don't like you, then you're going to have a hard uphill battle. So spend a little bit more time on rapport, getting to know them a little bit. Show them that you're a real person, a real human being, right? But other than that, guys, go out and have some fun today. Protect some families out there. And, I'll see you guys all in the group me here in a little bit.
Yes, sir. Hey, Drew, everybody can just leave. I was just saying that I did not get the email about the Will Kit. Also, I'm not part of a group me or something. And also, I would like to have your email and phone number.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I'm kind of out of the loop here, so
I got you. I'm gonna throw it in the chat for you right now, Mo.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Can I get in as well, Drew?
Yeah. My phone number is first, and then boom, and there's my my email as well.
All right, and would you be kind enough to send me that Will presentation?
Yep, text me your email address.
Here, I'll drop it in the chat here.
No, just text it to me so I got your number too.
Okay, gotcha, bro.
Cool?
Yes, sir.
Can I text you as well, Drew? I don't think
Nick.
I got it.
Yeah, I'll resend it to you too, Nick. Send me your email address, bud.
At theweenaagency.com. Yes, sir. Got it. The Weena Agency. Yes, sir. All right, Drew, my man. Thank you. I really appreciate it, my man.
All right, guys. We'll see you soon.
You as well. All right. Bye-bye.